Okay, our first parable is going to be Matthew chapter 21, 33 through 41, the vicious vine dressers. The vicious vine dressers. Now, some people call them the tenants. So, a master goes away, he rents out this vineyard, and then we're going to see what happened. The purpose of this parable is to address the people who question Jesus' authority. The Lord replies to them with a parable, but one we'll see is in the middle. So he tells three parables, but we're going to look at the one that's in the middle. Matthew chapter 21, verse 33 through 41. Verse 3 says, "Here another parable. There was a certain landowner who planted a vineyard and set a hedge around it, dug a winepress in it, and built a tower. And he leased it to the vine dressers and went into a far country." Verse 34 says, "Now when the vintage time or the time of harvest drew near, he sent his slaves to the vine dressers that they might receive its fruits." It's time for payment. "And the vine dressers took his slaves. He beat one, killed one, and stoned another." Verse 36. "Again, he sent other slaves, more than the first, and they did likewise to them. Then last of all, he sent his son to them, saying, 'They will respect my son.' But when the vine dressers saw the son, they said among themselves, 'This is the heir. Come, let us kill him, seize his inheritance.'" Verse 39. "So they took him and cast him out of the vineyard and killed him. Therefore, when the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to those vine dressers?" Verse 41. They, the Pharisees, the scribes, who were questioning Jesus, they said to him, "He will destroy those wicked men miserably and lease his vineyard to other vine dressers who will render to him the fruits in their seasons." We will see the parable, the purpose, and the plan in these verses. Jesus speaks and explains the parable, but explained it veiled in a veiled way. You might ask, what does that have to do with parable? He is speaking in a metaphoric language to explain his crucifixion and how the religious people rejected him. Notice we're talking about the vicious vine dressers. In verse 35, "And the vine dressers took his slaves, and he beat one, killed one, and stoned the other." There was a question asked to spark the parable. Now, what sparked the parable? Matthew 21, verse 33. "By what authority you doing these things? And who gave you this authority?" That's what the Pharisees asked Jesus. Jesus has authority because he is the Son of God. The vineyard is Israel, whose leaders did not respect the Son of God when he came. The nation reject the Father when they refuse the witness of the prophet. What is the main prophet that they reject in this immediate context was John the Baptist. And now they are about to get ready to reject the Son of God. They reject Jesus because he taught things that were internal and their religion was external. Because he unmasked their hypocrisy and their pretense. And so he is moving freely through the temple which he himself cleansed, teaching whatever he was teaching. They are threatened by that, and in a fitting of a race have a meeting together as to how they might stop him from swaying the people any further. And so they confronted him. The Lord replied to them with a trilogy of parables. Did you see that? And from here, this message, we will look at the parable, but the parable is number 2. This is the sharpest parable that our Lord has given so far. It is his final warning to the religious ruler. So point number 1, the parable. Notice in verse 33, "Hear ye another parable." Jesus used the Greek word another here. It means another of the same kind. He had just given them a parable about 2 sons. Here is another parable in the same speech, in the same style, But more than that, the parable of two sons was a parable about judgment. And here is another parable about judgment, another one of the same kind. For they have manifest collectively a rejection of Jesus Christ, the Pharisees and the religious ruler. So the parable he gives them are parables that bring upon them judgment due to those who reject him. They have rejected him, so in these parables he rejects them. Christ, when he spoke in parables, it would be to reveal to those who were sincerely interested, but would prove only irritation, those who were hostile to Jesus. Let's look at the purpose of the parable. So we saw the parable, right? Let's look at the purpose. Look at verse 34. When the season for the fruits drew near, he sent the servants to the tenants to get his fruit. So the purpose, God did much for Israel, expecting the nation to bear fruit for his glory. But the nation rebelled against God and refused to bear fruit. Look at verse 35 and 36. And the tenants took his servants, beat one, killed another, and stoned another. Again, he sent another servant, more than the first, and they did the same thing. God sent many prophets and other servants to deal with them, but Israel mistreated them, and they killed them. Look at verse 37 and through 39. Finally, he sent his son to them, and they will respect my son. But when the tenants saw the son, they said to themselves, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him and have his inheritance. Notice in verse 39. And they took him and threw him out of the vineyard, and they did what? Killed him. Did you see that in verse 37 and 39? Then God sent his son, and they killed him. And they even cast him out of the vineyard. The vineyard out of Israel, right? Outside of the gates of Israel will he be crucified. The Jews themselves spoke of their own sentence after Jesus asked them a question. Let's look at verse 40 and 41. When therefore the owner of the vineyard come, what would he do to these tenants? Verse 31. Listen what they said. To him he will put those wretched to miserable, the death, let out the vineyard to other tenants. They're Israelites. So if he loaned the tenants out, the other ones are Gentiles, who will give him fruit in season. After God did this, the very answer that they said was actually their judgment. He took their spiritual privileges away, destroyed Jerusalem, gave their blessing to Gentiles. Further answering the question about his authority, Jesus told the parable of a certain landowner planted a vineyard, set hedges around it, installed a wine press in it, built a tower, rented it out to vine dressers, went away into a distant country. At the time of harvest, he sent his servants to the vine dressers to get his share of the crops. But the vine dressers beat one, killed one, stoned another. He sent other slaves. They received the same treatment. The third time, he sent his only son, thinking that they would respect him. The master represents God the Father. The vineyard is Israel, who are the leaders, did not respect the son when he came. The nation rejected the Father when they refused the witness that were slaves that was given, which are the prophets. The immediate one was John. And now they were about to reject the son, knowing fully well that he was the heir, the son. They killed him, and the idea they seized an inheritance. So we saw the parable, we saw the purpose, but now let's explore the plan. Look at verse 38. The plan. When the vine dressers saw the son, they said among themselves, this is the heir. Come, let's kill and seize his inheritance. What they didn't want the son, they wanted what? The inheritance. Now they killed the man's son. They knew who he was. It was no mystery. They knew exactly who he was. They planned his murder. It was premeditated. First degree, the result of careful, wicked planning. with full knowledge of who he was. They premeditated his murder so they could control everything. Knowing fully well that he was the heir, they killed him with the idea of ceasing the inheritance. Everybody talking about heaven is not going to make it. It's not about heaven. It's about the heir who is in heaven. It's Jesus, the Christ. They had failed to acknowledge the master's right over them, and they had treated his messengers and prophets badly. They ultimately would even kill his son, Jesus Christ, outside of the vineyard, outside of Jerusalem. What do you think would happen to these vicious vine-dressers? Just as people hear the parable must realize what the master will do, so shall we. Obviously, the master will not let them continue to operate in the vineyard, but he will bring judgment on them. The land will be taken away from them and used by other tenants who will give him the rightful share of the harvest. So the thing is, if you're in the church and you want to get to heaven and you deny the Son, you're not crucifying him, but you're denying him because death is acting like he don't exist. Where do you sit today? Do you have victory believing in Jesus? Or are you like these vicious vine dressers?